and go on to the next pillar. I'm going to talk about spiritual here. I'm going to give you some important characteristics, but you are going to then visit the page in Cougar View that takes you to a really great website that links historic recordings of spirituals so that you can hear people sing it, who really sing them in the most authentic way, maybe closer to the source than my spiritual interpretation would be. So, spirituals. Spirituals were the religious songs of enslaved Africans who were forced to assimilate to Christianity when they were brought to the North American continent. They were forced to abandon their language and abandon their culture, which included their religious beliefs. And instead, they sort of were just made to forcibly adopt the language, the customs to a certain extent, and the religion of their enslavers. Slaves were forbidden to read and own books, and this prohibition continued after emancipation through Reconstruction. So having a body of musical repertoire that you would sing as an African American during slavery and Reconstruction and through Jim Crow era, having a body of repertoire that speaks for you, this oppressed people, means that you would not write it down, because most people initially were not able to read and write, and it wasn't the same thing as writing down a sonata or a symphony from European music. It was separate. Spirituals thus were and are musical forms that express the anguish, sorrow, survival, and determination of a people. They express some of these things openly. They express some of these things covertly, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. Spirituals, by their musical nature, are meant to be heard and remembered and sung, just like folk songs. And in other words, spiritual could be a subset of folk song if you think about that there is not an author, a composer of a particular spiritual. They just sort of arose. The form of spirituals often was a call and response form that one singer would sing the first line and be echoed singing that same line by everybody else who is in the neighborhood who is going to sing. That might mean that when it's echoed, it is then harmonized and sung with harmony in parts. That is an influence of European music, European art music and religious music, having an impact, sort of influencing how spirituals developed. The idea of call and response it comes from African song and African music, but the harmonic aspect that we hear when we hear spirituals today, that we sort of expect them to have this really rich, beautiful harmony, that is an influence of European music, and thus the music of the white slave owners and the white culture all around. So again, it just sort of illustrates, I think, for me as a musician, and maybe you as well, that there is not a way to draw lines between things and say, nope, these things don't intersect, because they sure do. Maybe that, again, is the beauty of the arts. The arts make us intersect, and we have to wrestle with how we intersect and what we celebrate from all of these intersections, I think. That's where I am today. Okay, so spirituals are religious in nature. They use especially vivid imagery from the Bible, especially the Old Testament, because the slaves saw so vividly, and in a way, ironically, I guess, this sort of enforced absorption of Christianity, and they see the enslavement of the Jews, of the Hebrews, by the Egyptians in the Old Testament, and the captivity of Israel by the kings of Babylon. They see all these Old Testament things that happened to the Jewish nation, and they say, that's just like us. Look, we are slaves too. And so the idea of Moses leading the people out of Egypt and fleeing Pharaoh and making it to the promised land, this spoke really loudly to a people who had whose lives were so I don't have words. This idea of, hey, that could be like us. The Old Testament especially becomes a metaphor. And then you think about the image, those of you who follow Christian faith, the images of the New Testament, that you're going to get salvation, you're going to find peace, you're going to be washed of all your sins or taken away from all your trouble. And the visions of John of Patmos in Revelation, which is the final book of the New Testament, that there's going to be this place where there's no crying, and everything is just as it should be, and we all live in harmony and peace and without toil and pain. All of these images speak so vividly to the enslaved African Americans. And so these become the sort of text of the spirituals. So the spirituals, the words, express this hope for final resolution. And it can be heard on, I think, maybe 3 levels. You hear this sort of religious version of it. Like, yes, after we die, we will get to heaven. Things will be fine. We just have to wait for that long away promise. That was also partly, frankly, the sort of party line that the white establishment intended for enslaved people to hear. Just hang on here. Put in your years of incredible, awful experiences, and eventually you'll be rewarded, in eternity after you die. Now, however, you could say, well, yes, as a statement of belief, sure, let's make it through to that. But there are a couple more levels that we can hear in spirituals. We hear the hope in spirituals that maybe things will get better, not in eternity, but at some point in our lifetime. How are we going to get there? Don't know. But we're going to express this anguish and pain, and we're going to get there. The third level is we're going to not just get there, we're going to make it happen. It's a code level. Not every spiritual has a sort of coded message, but some of the spirituals do. If you have read or watched anything about Harriet Tubman or about any of the Underground Railroad, that is the means, it's not a real railroad, right? It's not a train. But the secret smuggling out and fleeing away of slaves out of slave states to free states, and especially to Canada, that you would use a spiritual to signal, you'd sing it, and people would be like, aha, tonight's the night, we're going to go, pack up and go. If your slave owner just expects you to keep singing because he thinks it means that you're reasonably contented and not causing trouble and not planning to run away or anything, but he doesn't know that sort of hidden code, that it means when Israel was in Egypt's land, let my people go. Oppressed so hard they could not stand, let my people go. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt's land. Tell old Pharaoh to let my people go. That might be the sign. Let's go now. Pack up your stuff, sneak out, and go. So, spirituals, of course, have come to mean, have sort of done this in the 21st century because we use spirituals in Christian hymnody all the time. They have shifted their musical style from just being music that would be sung by Black Americans to music that is sung by Christians of all ethnicities and all backgrounds, and have sort of added on the different musical styles that we use in our many different worship traditions. However, when spirituals were first being sung to white audiences who didn't really know them, and this is post-emancipation, post-Civil War, so Reconstruction, Jim Crow. For example, the Fisk singers, the Jubilee singers at Fisk University, here where I am in Nashville, I was going to point, like you can see where Nashville is, and that's silly. The Fisk singers, Fisk University was a black college, it was Fisk College at the time, and a group of students under a music teacher's direction started touring around in order to raise funds to just actually rebuild the university, which had been kind of trashed during the Civil War. It was used as a hospital and barracks, I think, for Union soldiers. So it was falling apart, and they needed funds. But boy, was it hard to get people, establishment people, white people, to fund a black college. And so the Fisk singers started traveling around and singing concerts of spirituals. This was a huge deal. People had never heard music like this outside of the South. And they found it incredibly moving and expressive. That expressive melodic quality and the rich sort of harmonic depth to spirituals, that was what really sort of like, wow, this is amazing music. So, that's spirituals. I say that's spirituals. You're going to go in and actually look at a Cougar View page that I'm going to put together with some clickable links and have you listen to different spirituals. Spirituals, just like any other popular music, you will find in that little article I'll put together, you will find that the spirituals, the way people sing them, tell us something about how we are right now. If I sing a spiritual for you today, it will not just reflect the words of the spiritual and the melody. It'll reflect how I feel right now or what's going on in my life. You will hear that in the recordings that you have there. And one of the recordings that we have is sung by a woman who was born, I believe, was born in slavery or born just after emancipation. So if you think about how hard it is for us to hear music of past times as it was performed then, it's really hard, right? No recordings in the early 1800s. How are we supposed to know it? But here, this music's been passed down and someone is singing it in the 1920s, so it'll sound kind of grainy and, rough recording quality. But it's somebody singing it in the 1920s who heard it as far back as 1860s. That's like a voice from the past. That's really amazing.